Guys, this is Jacqui Cooper with JCooperTravels, and today I have a very special guest. Justin is here, and he's been involved in the travel world for umpteen years, and
That's one way of putting it.
we both have a lot in common, and we're both very concerned about what's going on within the travel community. And Justin and I connected on LinkedIn. And we, because we're both in the travel space, we wanted to have ongoing conversations about what's going on with the travel industry and other places that you can visit when a travel does get started. It already has, even though it keeps going back and forth. Justin, thank you so much for being here today. Would you like to introduce yourself? Because I know you've done so many things, and I would not do it justice by even, starting it off. So
I appreciate that. And Jacqui, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure spending the time with you that we have prior to this, and I appreciate you having me on. As you said, I've been in the travel industry what feels to be forever, but it's been my career, certainly remains my passion. I started about 35 years ago working on cruise ships, and the cruise ship back then was the Ark. Almost, feels like that, but I started with Royal Caribbean, believe it or not, working on cruise ships when it was just a 4-ship company.
wow.
Yeah, that was the Song of Norway, the Nordic Prince, and the new ship was the Song of America at the time. So I'm really dating myself then, but spent 13 years working on board ships, and then transitioned to land-based positions, working for tour operators and cruise lines, doing primarily product development and operations. And then about 5 years ago, I left my last corporate job with the travel industry and decided it was time for me to do something on my own. I felt like, as I've said to you, that I'm in the beginning of the 4th quarter of my career, and I wanted to leave the business feeling like I had done something to hopefully leave it a little bit better than I found it. So that was the start of the Evolved Traveler. And what we do to hopefully make things a little bit better is it's built on 2 core components, and that is sustainability and building a sense of global community. And we do that through what we call our evolved experiences, where we go a little bit deeper and engage our guests with the local community and make sure that we get off the beaten track and engage with the community so that our guests come away with something that they feel was a little bit more meaningful. And then in regard to sustainability, it's constantly furthering both our own education on it and hopefully informing our guests as to what it is, because it's not quite as simple as I think some people might think. And then I'm happy to say I'm very proud that this past summer, I got my own certification in sustainable tourism through Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which is just an outstanding organization and really sets the bar for the industry standard. So hopefully I didn't take too much time. That's my history in a nutshell.
No, I think it's great. And I'm really glad that you shared that, because I'm also passionate about protecting our environment. I'm passionate about preserving the locations that we visit as travelers, because I think that I want other generations to be able to go and see those locations as well in the same pristine condition that I might have seen it. And I'm concerned that sometimes when we travel, we're not maybe intentionally destructive, but we might not be as respectful as we should be. And so
I agree.
so
Yeah.
I really, when you and I connected initially, I was so excited to be able to share what you're doing
Thank
and
you.
the message of how you packaged, various trips and excursions, because I think there's a lot of thoughtfulness behind it.
I really
And
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think I'm really, as I wear a few different hats. I'm both a certified travel agent, but I also have a travel business where I can provide access to free links and codes for individuals that might want to book their own. But even in booking their own, I feel like we need to be looking at who do we book with and how do we book. And so
Especially in this time.
yes, and that's why I'm really excited about the conversations that we're going to have tonight, but also that we're going to continue to have, because
Yeah.
you and I have talked about having a variety of topics that we're going to focus on. So that way we can kind of share your wisdom and knowledge with those
Thank you.
that want to hear about it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know tonight we wanted to talk about just what travel in this type of environment with COVID kind of looks like. And it's
Yeah.
keep changing.
It is. It's fluid. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's going to remain so. I think that we have to approach it cautiously. There's no doubt that there is a pent up demand. Look, I haven't been on a plane in probably a year and a half myself. That is the longest in my career that I've ever gone without traveling. So, to our listeners and our viewers, believe me, I think any of us on this side of it can empathize with you greatly about wanting to go somewhere. There isn't one of us who wouldn't jump on a plane and go to wherever we could. Those are just beginning to open up. There's several options. Costa Rica is now open without testing. Several of the countries in South America are doing it in stages. You've got many of the Caribbean countries. And then you've got the World Tourism Association, who are providing safety certifications with that as well. All that being said, I still think very much it's going to be fluid. I think that as we see between the US and Europe, we're having the second wave of the virus. And I think that we're going to have to continue to be cognizant of the shifting geography of it, really. And that might mean that we have, right now we can go to Central America or South America for a time. Maybe that changes. We might be able to go to some of Asia in the near future, but I don't think that anything is going to be static anytime soon.
Yeah, I know that you talked about travel. Actually, a year ago today, my daughter and I were traveling to China. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's amazing how a year has changed.
Almost exactly a year.
Yeah. Well, we were flying out of LaGuardia tonight, like a year ago. So it's what is interesting, and I think very relevant to what you're saying, is the fluidity of where you can travel. Now, what's happened, and I've been following, and I also post on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, different cruise ships, they're paused. Different hotels, they open, then they change. Disney resorts, there have been a lot of, so when I say when the traveler is making plans, some of the things that they have to take into account is, am I booking directly with an airline? Will the airline honor a change without a fee? I just posted on LinkedIn the difference between travel protection and travel insurance.
Good point.
Because there are different insurance companies that I have access to that have some sort of COVID protection. I say some sort of,
vague.
it's because there are conditions in there where it could apply, but you also, you really have to kind of think about, are you getting the golden coverage? Cancel for any reason.
Right.
Is it something in your control? Is it something not in your control? So that's why it is
Exactly.
important to talk with.
And they all changed very quickly when COVID began for the US market this past spring.
Yes. And then you also have, we're located here, but we're going to a country that maybe just got closed down. So there's a lot of, but you don't want to necessarily book. You can book a trip now and get really great air deals. You can
Yes,
book a trip now and get some really great hotel deals, both on platforms as well as off platforms. But the challenge, as you said, is will you be able to switch your trip if for some reason the borders close? And that's a question that you shouldn't necessarily not plan a trip, but you have to protect yourself financially.
exactly. And I think that that's really where a qualified and knowledgeable travel advisor comes in, as well as tour operators. They're going to be able to help people weave through that, and they're going to always be looking out for you and have your back. And that's really what their job is to begin with. Look, I love Costco. Who doesn't, right? You know, especially when you need your paper towel and other things that you know we all love to buy there. But I think any of us, particularly in the industry, remember the fiasco that we all read about with Costco Travel when all of this broke out, and the just tens of thousands of calls that went unanswered or people were on hold because it just was, the volume was too much. And our response as travel agents, travel advisors, and tour operators was to say, hey, this is what we do. When these things happen, there's always somebody on the other side of the phone. Now, going to what you were specifically saying, I think this is where, you know, our knowledge comes in. First of all, I personally think the airlines have been doing a fantastic job, which is not something any of us in the business or even in the public typically say. But I think that the airlines have really been doing a fantastic job. And I think personally, it's probably the safest time to ever fly. And I know you've probably seen them as well, Jackie, that the articles the last week or two in the trades are that, you know, it's safer to fly than it is to go to the grocery store. And that makes perfect sense, right? Because they're really cleaning those planes in between each flight. You go to the grocery store, yes, we all have to wear masks and whatnot, but we're touching things that we don't know who else has touched them. You know, it's random. And I don't think that flying is random right now. I think it's very controlled. And I think that the airlines are doing a great job. Now, you have your other travel components that it's difficult to make that assessment with. And I think then it becomes, what is the individual's personal comfort factor? And are you working with a travel advisor or a tour operator who can provide you with as much information on a destination, including the components to get to and from? And that means from the moment you leave your home, you know, to make an informed decision. Are you comfortable with this? And that's ultimately what it comes down to. But I think that that is a decision that everybody is going to be faced with for probably another year or so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you and I were also talking about how this is like a ripple effect. And so when you take a look at, and this is what kind of worries me, is the number of people that are being impacted, and then being able to have those individuals be able to be returned into the job categories when things start again. So, I mean, we can start with the cruises. You know, there's a huge number of people that work um, behind the scenes as well as in front of the customers. And then you have the hotels that are connected, and then you have the air that's connected. You have the excursions that are, you have the transportation, you have the food, you have all these other, you have the insurance. So a lot
Yeah.
of things are going on. And if people
Yeah,
are laid,
just think one individual. Think of if you think about a cruise that you've taken, you know, you might think of it in a blanket way, but as to your point, how many different things did you have to involve? You know, how many touch points did you engage with on that cruise? The crew. You made a great point about like going and buying new clothes. You know, it's things like that. You know, that's a huge seller in January after the holidays is vacation wear.
mm,
Right? I mean, that's that you go into Kohl's or Nordstrom's or wherever, and they've got vacation wear out in January because that's the market.
Yeah.
It goes that deep when you're talking about these other layers.
And you also have the cities or the communities that depend on the tourism.
Great point.
You have people who are going to visit sites. I know that one of my partners is in Scotland. So we have another podcast called Love Travel Scotland. And so many of those little communities, well, they're not so little, but so many of those communities are impacted because the tourists aren't coming. So shops, the castle,
Well,
I mean, you name it.
I mean, but you can even bring that home to the US. Think of Fort Lauderdale, Miami. I mean, their economy is so wrapped around tourism and to a large extent to the cruise industry, both of those places. And it's completely stopped and will be close to a year before it even begins again. And even at that, it's not, they're not going to see the level it was in, say, January of this year until probably 2, maybe more years before the ships really are back up to speed, because they can't put out all of the ships obviously at one time. It's way too much inventory. A lot of it's going to be how is it going kind of thing. Are we able to keep everybody safe? There's going to be some trepidation to begin with, both on the cruise line side and certainly the public's part. So they're going to be a little slow with the rollout of the ships. And even at that, the ships will be at 50% capacity. So I think on board, you're looking at a completely different product as well. It will be nice from a space capacity because you're not going to be worrying about getting that lounge chair by the pool, but it's going to be a whole different product. And I think that there's going to be, we're going to have to take time for an adaptation to that as well.
You and I were talking before we started the recording about the cost of cruises and the profits. I mean, we all know that every product has a built-up markup, but even within the markup, there's a net expense, and then there's the profit that they use as a cushion to carry them over hard times. So at 50% capacity, like you said, they're going to need to be rethinking how are they costing things. And you also talked about excursions. That's going to be different.
That's going to be very different. And again, I said in that conversation, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I believe, particularly for the passengers, the consumers. From a health standard, it's understandable that the cruise lines will very likely, I can't say definitively, but very likely, require the passengers to go only on the excursions that they sell in order to maintain that bubble environment. Again, from a health perspective, that's very understandable. From a commerce market, it does, as you say, continue to have that ripple effect, because that affects businesses on shore who do business with other companies that sell excursions, or the guests who go ashore and buy excursions once they get ashore. So there's still those whole micro sort of economies and transactions that are going to be affected locally. But the ships are, it is based on onboard revenue. I made a joke about working on the Ark, but in those days, this was beginning in the 80s, that essentially the cruise fare was the revenue that the ships made from the guests. Now it's a whole different model where onboard revenue really is how the cruise lines make their money. Which is why we see $800-900 for these great cabins on board the ship. It's very enticing. And then once you're there, it's a different mentality to spend the money, which is great. This is what we're supposed to do on vacation. Please know I am not by any stretch knocking this model. It's just different than when I started. But, with 50% capacity and say 50% less of your fleet out, this is going to be a very dramatic change for the cruise lines themselves. And I think that they're going to have to, excuse the pun, navigate how they're actually generating revenue. Now, do I think that they'll push up cruise fares? No, because that's not going to attract the public. And that's what they need to do right now. So again, there's that fluidity. Are they going to be able to navigate and find ways to help offset those costs that they're incurring because they're not making that money that they made in 2019 and in these great decade before that?
So I know that for those that might not know about podcasts or even the YouTube, there's a little block of information above the podcast and YouTube. So there will be direct information on how you can reach Justin and learn more about both his organization and the magazine that he's creating.
We just started,
Yeah.
Evoke.
Yeah, and all that other good stuff in terms of how to make contact with him and myself as well. I know that we are going to be having ongoing conversations. We are going to be talking about how do you find sustainable, friendly type of organizations to book with.
And really, what is sustainability, beyond picking up the towel off your bathroom floor in the hotels and single-handedly saving the Amazon forest?
Yep, and we're also going to be featuring and highlighting many of the trips that Justin has organized and the places that he has taken individuals, because I know that those stories are right now are virtual trips that we're going to be going on, but they're important too, because when we do start to travel, I think it's important to support different businesses to include Justin. So any last moment thoughts, because I know we're going to be back on together shortly, but for the listeners right now, any last moment thoughts that you want to share with them?
No, again, I think I appreciate that. I said no, but I will share one last thought. And that, and thinking about travel, it is really what your comfort level is right now. There are opportunities to travel right now and to do it safely, but it's got to be what your comfort level is. And if you want to do it, just speak to a knowledgeable travel advisor or tour operator, and you can do it.
I agree with you. And I would also, like you talked about in terms of the airlines, each airline is a little bit different. Some are keeping seats separate. Some are saying they're keeping it separate because of public perception. Some are putting people together. So just ask the questions before you book, so that way you can find out at the current time what the airline is doing or what the organization is doing, because again, things are very fluid. But one thing that I would say, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, get travel insurance.
Amen.
Not just because of the fact that, granted, you probably won't get COVID, but other things happen. And
it may not be with you, it might be your family, or
Exactly.
just something completely unseen.
Yeah.
And if I may piggyback on that, Jacqui, to say that in this time of COVID, to make sure when you talk about asking questions of your travel advisor, if they're getting the insurance for you, make sure that you understand it fully. If you're buying it for yourself, same thing, go in with a list of questions and make sure that you understand that policy fully.
Yeah, because even if you do buy it through me, through my vendors, the vendors themselves say, the customers need to read and understand, because you are the ones that are outlaying the funds. And even though you might make a call to me at 11 o'clock at night, which is like, 5 o'clock your time, in a different time zone, and I'm always there, like you said, to help, you still need to know what you to do. So
Exactly.
yeah, so everyone who's listening, travel is starting again. Thank you for listening. I also would ask that you please subscribe and like both to the podcast as well as to the YouTube, because again, YouTube has told me that I need to get to 1,000 subscribers, which I know will happen. But with 1,000 subscribers, I can put Justin's link directly into the YouTube side. It will be directly in on the podcast side. And I look forward to having more travel conversations.
We're going to get there.
Yep, for sure.
Okay.
Anyone, have a great night. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.